Alright, so for this last video, I thought I'd just give you some context to what you need to know for the source-based question, right? Which is the British, about British rule, right? British rule post-war Singapore. Is British rule in post-war Singapore? Okay, so you need to know about the problems they face right after the war and what happened. What are the main things that happened that led to people, um, right? The main things that led to people wanting, of course, independence, right, from the British. Okay, so number one, uno thing, basic needs are not met, right? So this is the first thing, basic needs are not met. So what are things that I'm talking about in terms of basic needs are not met is basically number one, food, and number two is shelter. So when I'm talking about shelter, I'm talking about housing crisis, housing problems, right? I'm talking about the kampung life, right? Lack of housing, basically, right? When I'm talking about food, yeah, I'm talking about you need to have rationing, right? Because you have lack of food. And what is the outcome? People are malnourished, right? People start to look very thin, right? People, diseases start to spread because people are malnourished. So you have a lot of diseases, right? People have to eat poorly, have to eat things like very poor things like tapioca and and so on. So they're living a very horrible life, right? With a lack of food because the British have not done enough, right? So all these things, right? The British did not provide basic needs, and basic needs I only refer to as food and shelter. All right, this is basic needs, food and shelter. Right. Number two, we have our insensitivity, so lack of understanding. Okay, another reason why the British rule in Singapore, right, was losing popularity, leading to people wanting independence, is because the British failed to understand the people. Right. So number one, fail to understand the people is religious, right? So religious insensitivity. And what do you have for this example? Basically, you have your Maria Hertog riots, right? And what is the basis of this Maria Hertog riots? Is that the British did not respect the Muslim laws and custom, right? Because they voted in favor to grant Maria custody back to her Dutch parents, and her Dutch parents were actually Catholic, right? Right, so they favored and they favored the Dutch, they favored the Westerners, the Western law, and so on and so forth, leading to a lot of unhappiness over the outcome, finally leading to the riots, right? And most of the people who got attacked were the Europeans, right? Europeans or the Eurasians because of this. So they were insensitive to the. This case shows they are insensitive towards religion in terms of they didn't respect the Muslim laws, customs, and culture, especially the marriage, Maria's marriage, right? A 14-year-old, she got married to this teacher, and it was declared as invalid, right? Invalid. So this is religious insensitivity. So next one, which shows lack of understanding, right? Is of course the racial insensitivity, right? And the biggest thing you will see for this is your anti-NS riots, right? Anti-NS riots, right? And why did this happen? Basically, it just happened because the British lack of understanding, right? Did not see the concern, did not show care and concern, right? Did not show care and concern for the local Chinese who wanted to study overseas, right? Because they wanted to study overseas in China. But why? Why did the British not allow them to study in China? Because of one thing, and that one thing is communism, right? They are afraid that when they go to China, they will be influenced by this idea of communism, and when they come back, they might change the whole society, take over the British, and turn Singapore into a communist country. So hence, they didn't allow them to study in China, and secondly, they make them go for national service, right? Means to fight in the military. Fighting for who? Fighting for the British. So of course, if you're a Chinese student, you'll be very unhappy over this. Like, hey, I want to study, I want to further my career, I want to further my education, but yet you made me to go NS. So hence, this is the insensitivity of the British, right? When the Chinese interpret this thing, right? When the Chinese interpret this, right, they will go to the extreme and say that the British are imperialists. So the key word, they will say the British are imperialists. That means they don't care about us. They want to, right? They will go to the extreme, right? They will use a lot of exaggeration to talk about the bad things, to talk about how bad the British were in not caring for them. But actually, the British just wanted them to not fall to communism, right? So you get sources which talk about this, which talk about people's unhappiness over this NS thing, right? Okay, so that is for number 2 on the reason why British rule in post-war Singapore left people wanting independence due to its failure. Okay, then number 3, of course, finally the last thing you must know is the security issue, right? Security, right, and doing more, right, and put efforts for the locals, especially the workers, to have better lives, right? Efforts for the locals to have better lives. Okay, security. So what happened? Of course, this one falls under the case study of the Hockley bus riots. Hockley bus riots. Okay, Hockley bus riots is not because people are unhappy over the British, right? They were unhappy, right? It is just workers, bus drivers unhappy with the employers, with their employers, right? Employers from the Hockley bus company. But why were they unhappy with the British? It's because of the protest, right? They protest against their employers, and it sparked into a riot. And when the riots happened, right, the British treated the rioters and the people very, very harshly and very unfriendly. They didn't look into what is the reason for the riots carefully. They just imprisoned, they just captured and imprisoned many people, and then it made things worse, right? Through their handling, right? So it's through the handling of the crisis, of the riots, right? That's when people start to see the inefficiencies of the British in handling crisis. In handling crisis, not only in handling crisis in terms of security, right? In terms of the poor police force, the weak police force, but also in terms of normally when you get this type of cases, you'll look into why it erupted, right? And help to make the lives of the workers better, but they didn't do that. Instead, they used this to further imprison the workers and make their life, and they didn't solve the problem. They didn't step in. They didn't step in to solve the problem, right? The British did not step in to solve the problem between the workers and the employers. So again, this shows lack of care, right? So hence people didn't like the British because of this. But the main thing about this Hong Lee is the security issue, that they didn't treat the riot properly, they didn't handle it properly, showing a lack of security. And people do not like to live in a society which has a lack of security and a weak police force, because there will be chaos, right? There will be chaos everywhere, and thus this is the thing that puts people down and makes people want to forgo the British and want to seek independence for themselves. Alright, so this is the context knowledge that you need to know for this SBQ.